Again, presented by Sea of Dead. These are the dumpster darlings here for the week. So we look at the biggest performances from the guys who were the least owned to show just how cruel the fantasy football world really can be here in 2024. At quarterback, 15% owned, it is Jameis Winston. 35.98 fantasy points. Yes, it was a lot of interceptions, but holy cow, was it a lot of fantasy points. Our wide receivers this week, 1% owned. Parker Washington. I'm pretty sure he plays for Jacksonville. He comes in at 21.3 fantasy points. Nick Westbrook-Akine, 17% rostered, 19.6 fantasy points. Our running back this week, 0% owned. 15.4 fantasy points. That would be Chris Rodriguez. Also, 17% owned for Ray Davis, and he is at 13.2 fantasy points. Austin Hooper is our tight end, 1% rostered at 12.2 fantasy points. And in our flex spot, it is Marvin Mims. A 93-yard touchdown will help, but 2% rostered, 18.4 fantasy points. So before we get to the kicker, you look at that, and again, 17% owned is the best that we have on this. Our kicker, 1% owned, is Chad Ryland, 1% owned, 17 fantasy points. And our defense, Seattle, rostered in 22% of leagues, 14 fantasy points. So our dumpster darling team this week, 167.08 fantasy points. Again, the fantasy football world, very, very cruel.